to Windows on the World Extra. We're going to be joined via telephone by Mr. Piers Corbyn in this additional part of the show, which is known as Activists versus Narcissists. Please have a listen to the first part of the show. We're going to follow that up now with something a little bit more relaxed, and we have Piers Corbyn on the Jellybone, coming straight into Windows Towers. So, Mr. Corbyn, how are you?
Well, I'm fine, and I think, I would say that 2019 is going to be a year of massive change. There's loads of stuff going on which represents a crisis of government in more ways than one, and people rising up in many ways, expressing a new understanding of what is going on against them.
Now, in the first part of the show, we talked about change and the lack of definition of change with relation to change agents. So we know you're not a change agent, so what change would you foresee happening?
Well, first of all, I would say that the issues of social cleansing are now becoming basically totally clear to people in all walks. I mean, when they started demolishing bits of council estates, it was always told to people as some necessary improvement. Now, the fact that all council estates are under threat just proves that it has nothing to do with improvements. It's to do with land theft and implementing Agenda 21 to increase the density of cities and socially cleanse unwanted people. So I think we will see an upsurge in action against what's going on. Some stuff is kicking off on Monday with another demonstration in Southwark, for example, at Southwark Town Hall at 6 o'clock against what they're planning for the Elephant and Castle, which is, of course, is an archetypal microcosm of the social cleansing that's happening everywhere. So that is a big issue, I think, is going on. The other big issue, of course, is Brexit and what this means for ordinary people. And I think this month now, people ought to really focus on signing that no deal petition, that no deal is a good deal or the best thing around right now. And in fact, it's not a threat at all. It's a petition to Parliament, which must have reached about, well, last time I looked, there was way over 250,000 getting over to 300,000 signatures, which is incredible. That means there will be a debate in Parliament, or equivalent to a debate in Parliament, something in Parliament about that issue. And I think it may be that we're going to have to convince quite a few of the Remainist types around, who are mostly in London and Bristol and to some extent in Birmingham, but they're not reflected around the country. People who somehow believe the European Union is a good thing.
We were talking about that at the start of the show, actually, and it referred to a Facebook post which was posted by somebody who received an MBE recently, basically saying, what are we going to do? 88% of people in the Labour Party or Labour Party members want to have a people's vote. Now, what he was saying was that he loved your brother to start with, and your brother has somehow gone against his ideology, not Jeremy Corbyn's own ideology, but his, you see, because he thought that the Remainers were going to win, and he then very foolishly requested that MPs Stella Creasy and David Lammy did something about it. Well, I think he's barking up the wrong tree there, because those two have never done anything about anything unless it's virtue signalling on Twitter, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, I would say I don't believe this 88%. Bear in mind that all these opinion polls are biased against Brexit, which makes it remarkable that they did one of the Tory party, which says 76% favour no deal against other things. So it's probably 90%. Now, this so-called vote of 88% of Labour opinion, I think look at the sample size and you'll find it's small, but it's just loaded questions. And what does people's vote mean anyway? Because if it means new referendum, which is what the Blairites want it to mean, that's one thing. If it means some vote about something, well, that means something else. But quite frankly, anything on those lines extremely divisive and will just delay what would happen anyway, because the figures show that around the country, the vast majority of constituencies voted to leave and would still vote to leave even if there was a swing against, or less of a majority for leaving. My estimation, and just a number of MPs agree with this, is that the real support for leave has gone up.
Well, that's interesting, Piers.
The behaviour of the European Union, and it's revealing what the true nature of the European Union is, which I'll come to in a second after you have just added some important point.
Well, it's interesting that it's called the People's Vote, which is just propaganda, isn't it? Because it's not the People's Vote.
We've already had the People's Vote.
It should be called opposing the People's Vote.
Exactly.
Subversives opposing the People's Vote demand.
Yeah. and correct me if I'm wrong, Piers.
Exactly. But well, there was recently a post by the Green Party leader, which is, well, there's two of them, which is the current Green Party leader.
Actually, Piers, I'm quite stumped on that. Is it Caroline Lucas?
Caroline Lucas, it is indeed Caroline Lucas,
She put a post up saying that we've got to have a people's vote, and the reason for that is so we can fight for man-made climate change action. So I put a response which got loads and loads of retweets saying, actually, we've had a people's vote already, and man-made climate change is fiction. Loads of people retweeted that.
Fantastic.
And on the same thing, Tony Blair recently made a point. He said, he believed the Labour Party could be won back, he said. Now, I think we need to make the point to Tony Blair that the Labour Party has been won back, and he's talking about, can it be stolen again?
Exactly.
And I think he's onto a loser there. And one of his advisors, a number of his advisors, told him to shut up. And I think he...
Good.
Well, the point is, everything he says, people go the other way. So we should look forward to a effective no-deal Brexit. Because, you see, it's a complete no-brainer to anyone who thinks in the Labour Party that a second referendum or anything would be suicide for the Labour Party, because the majority of constituencies that voted Labour are Leave constituencies. There's a small number, relatively, of very strong Remain constituencies, but you know they're not going to make the difference. So if my brother was to declare he wanted to have a people's vote, it would mean massive opposition and certain defeat for the Labour Party. And the Tories that jump up and down for, all sorts of things, but including Brexit, would do better in a general election than otherwise they would. So he has to stick to his guns of the democratic process. But I think it's important now, and then Kate Hoey has been saying stuff like this in newspapers, that Labour needs to explain more about the advantages of leaving. I mean, there's a lot of advantages of leaving. One is that we reduce the tariffs and the price of food imported from Africa, and the price of food in Wetherspoons will go down, and that's been stated very clearly. Second thing is we keep our fish. Thirdly is we end the deindustrialisation machine known as the European Union Emission Trading Scheme, whereby we're paying for people to steal industries from Britain and move them to India, for example. I mean, there's loads of stuff like that which can easily be explained. And I saw on TV recently on the George Galloway show a very interesting conversation with a guy who was a Tory who working in America to explain what's happening in Britain in various media posts. And he was very interesting. He was asked by George Galloway, well, what do you make of all these Remain scare stories? Remain scare stories. He said, they're complete nonsense. All of them are complete nonsense. He said, look at the shelves on Sainsbury's. All that food on there comes from all over the world. There's loads of different tariff arrangements, deals of all sorts. which change on a daily basis. Do you think a little thing relatively like the European Union is going to make a big difference? And he said, of course it's not. They'll solve any problem. That's what they can do. And then George mentioned the one about drugs, medical drugs. Would be no guiding rules to govern the administration of medical drugs when we leave the European Union. And the guy said, well, there's no problem there. All that has to happen now is the minister in Britain says, we hereby, from this day onwards until further notice, continue to adopt the European Union rules on the administration of drugs. End of story. It will take 1 minute to write that sentence, and it doesn't even need anything in Parliament. So it's complete poppycock, all these scare stories going around, and in reality the European Union and the government are preparing for a no-deal Brexit. And my estimation is it will be a Y2K moment, and on the 30th of March no one will notice any difference on anything.
Yeah, this is all very interesting. I've just put the thing in chat here, just going into chat, and this is interesting. Eric Von Essex again has come up with a good point. He said VAT came in soon after joining the EU from memory. He said that VAT was the EU, and he said if we come out of the EU, pound shops will become 80p shops, which I think is quite an interesting idea.
I do like that idea.
I'm all for that.
The VAT would need a decision of Parliament. Now, I can't see this government. Well, let's see what they say. Let's argue for it. But a point I'd like to make about the whole nature of the European Union, which is what the Remainists, the young Remainists, just don't have a clue about, is that the European Union was set up as at the origin of this current one, plus other ideas, was of course Hitler's generals who wanted to have another way of running Europe by a different means, and that's what the origin of the European Union, plus other factors. But the way it's set up is to be an undemocratic dictatorship, or let's say system, which enables the super rich corporations around the world to plunder Europe. And that means close down industries if they can make money by exporting the jobs to elsewhere, which is what the European Union Emission Trading Scheme does in Britain. We've been deindustrialised massively, and it's an open door for special arrangements with super corporations to asset strip and privatise. And that, you know, they're hovering ready. Well, they've always wanted to and do this stuff all the time. And the European Union rules are made for them. Privatisation is part of the game. And in fact, in France, a lot of the demonstrations have been against privatisation impositions from the EU. And the Labour Party will not be able to nationalise the railways under current European Union legislation. So we've got to get out of the European Union. And the Remainists think, oh, it's a happy, clappy, nice place. Not at all. It's not a nice place. It's a prison, and we've got to get out of it. Now, the reason why you never get the truth about it is because it is a prison, and it's sold to the people in the name of the social chapter, like there's various rights enshrined in various European laws, which we can have ourselves anyway, which we do have. But you see, that means in the Tory party, the Remainists are not going to say, we want to stay there so that we're a prison and Wall Street can steal from us. And the ones who want to leave in the Tory party are also not going to say, oh, we want to leave because we don't like social chapters that give people rights. No, they're not going to say that. Of course, they don't like social chapters that give people rights. But see, both aspects of the Tory party, they're never going to speak the truth. They're just going to talk about something else. You know, anything else, like scare stories about immigration numbers. I mean, obviously there's all sorts of issues about immigration, but they'll concentrate on that only rather than deindustrialisation, for example, because they just don't have the arguments. Now, in the Labour Party, people will, the only honest group, the Blairites are not going to be honest about we want to stay in so you can be ripped off and privatised. The left exit people will be honest and say, yeah, look, the whole thing is a con, let's get out and have our own rules to defend our social rights. And that is, you know, not what. Well, that is the left position of exiting the European Union, which is one I support. Although the word left versus right these days has become somewhat confused because the Democrat Party that is expert on bombing declares itself left, and of course the Trumpites declare themselves of right wing. But frankly, all these definitions cause complete confusion, especially in America. So I just think we should go for accountability versus non-accountability, and an accountable politics in Britain now for Brexit means we leave.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and it seems to be the consensus of people who've thought it through, but it's not the consensus of people who don't know what the European Union was and is intended to be. That's the interesting thing, that you've got people who, like our entitled friend I was quoting earlier on, are stuck in this mindset that somehow it's all about division. Brexit's all about division, and they obviously read too much of the Guardian and all that.
Actually. Yeah, I mean, it kind of changed really as soon as Blair, he put forward this image of Europe as being this happy clappy, let's all be together type thing, whereas Labour historically had always been Eurosceptic. And it's only and it's only lately that people just didn't realise, and mainly the young people who are Remainers don't understand where the European Union came from, and actually they'd say, oh well, you're a conspiracy theorist if you say it was a Nazi plot, but you look at Europäische Wirtschaft Gemeinschaft, and that's a lot might be easy for me to say, but that is the document that says basically it was the blueprint, it was Hitler's blueprint should he fall to the Allies, and it's exactly what the European Union is about.
And it's not democratic, you see. That's the crucial thing, isn't it? Who is this man, Juncker? What is he? Did I vote for him? Did you vote for him?
No.
Did anyone vote for him?
No.
He's somehow there and seems to sort of hold court over these different countries. I mean, it's incredible.
And, and the very first commissioner of the European Union was Walter Hallstein, who was a lawyer for the Nazi Party. It's all, and Juncker, let's face it, the Juncker family were arms dealers, They made aeroplanes and stuff.
What's that? The Juncker family were arms dealers?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not surprised.
Yeah. So, if people really understood the history of the European Union, they wouldn't be voting to remain. They really wouldn't.
No, they would not. I would recommend people get hold of the Australian Alert Service stuff. They produced a new pamphlet about the menace of the European Union and the inevitability of a coming crash, an economic crash, which is quite likely mixed up with the European Union. But I would say get hold of this stuff. We could put a link up on Windows on the World. But the Australian Alert Service, and the website is www.cecaust.com.au. I'll repeat that, www.cecaust.com.au.
Yeah, that's the Citizens Electoral Council of Australia.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. Yes, that's right. And they've got a new pamphlet out, which I suppose is available online, about the European Union and also stuff about the crisis in general economics of the world. But their stuff is very well argued and, carefully presented. So anyone who's serious about wanting to understand what the European Union is about, beyond what we've just been saying, I would recommend go and have a look at the CEC.
Yes, I would recommend that to anybody who wastes time looking at The Guardian, because unlike The Guardian, you'll find some facts in this press release from the Citizens Electoral Council of Australia, who are a very interesting minor political party, it says on Wikipedia, and we've got our problems with Wikipedia, and those will become apparent in the next few weeks, because not only Piers, of course, has been slandered by them, I've had problems with them, and I've got the screenshots to prove.
My so-called biography is just a sort of slander sheet with a few facts thrown in, you know.
That's exactly what they do, and I think that everyone should boycott Wikipedia and use the next available decent source, which is always on the same page. And I look at a lot of ancient history stuff, and I'll always go to the history websites underneath. And most of the stuff that's on Wikipedia is cut and pasted from them, but with a lot of opinion thrown in. But I do now have the screenshots where the people who are administrating on Wikipedia have been exposed, and we'll be doing a show about that. But when I did research for this, I found out that most people who are saying anything which is indeed true and against the accepted corridor of opinion are slandered by this subversive waste of space organisation, which is what it is. Anyway, carrying on to the next part of the show, we're talking about how these groups and activists are becoming more and more fake, and the difference between the yellow vests, the original idea of it, and the effect it's had upon Macron, and the fake protests we have in this country, like the Extinction Rebellion. I was just going to ask you a question, Piers, as to how you think this yellow vest idea could take off in Britain without obviously the usual stuff about it being labelled far right and all the crap that comes out of our rubbish media. Well, how do you think that it could be implemented over here? I mean, if there's a yellow vest movement, what would you first and foremost request that it put to the top of the agenda?
Well, I think the way forward will be to put specific demands in front of it. You have a general demand, obviously, like end austerity, but I think, you know, specific things like stopping social cleansing and yellow vests backing the opposition to the Elephant and Castle development. For example, you know, make them specific and practical where people can see that what we're saying as yellow vests is true. And then link that up, of course, to Agenda 21 policies, which flow from the European Union, and of course are behind things like the social cleansing agenda. I think yellow vests could take off in Britain if, as I said, if it is practical and focused, because the Remainer stuff, you see, is totally nebulous. It's just kind of windbaggish waffleism, with just nice sounding phrases like a people's vote. I think that the raft of ideology which is around can be well combated by a yellow vest movement. By the raft of ideology, I mean is you have the ideology from the Remainers that the European Union is sacred and good and happy-clappy and everything else is bad. And the second thing they have is that man-made climate change is the source of nearly all evil, and you've got to believe in it. And the third thing is, if you like, hate objects. They have a set of hate objects which they wheel out if you don't agree with them on the European Union and on climate change. The hate objects are, you're a denier of anything, which means you're somehow to do with the Holocaust and anti-Semitic, and you believe in Donald Trump or something. So see, Donald Trump is a great hate object, and denialism is a hate object. So if you don't agree with them, you're labelled as somehow supporting them. Trump or denialism. Well, to that I say, well, on climate change, Donald Trump agrees with me because we thought about it before he did. Well, so what's the problem there? You know, if Donald Trump tells you it's Sunday, do you say it's not Sunday, it's Monday? I mean, it's just poppycock with it all. We have to look at things as facts, and the same with so-called denialism of anything. Well, what has that got to do with the issue before us? Come back to the point is what I say on all these things. But see, there is a raft, and it is manipulated by the BBC and the Guardian to brainwash young people into a certain camp of ideas. And it's amazing how Tony Blair has managed to sort of squat into this thing and bring people away from clearly supporting radical solutions that my brother's putting forward into somehow supporting Remain in the European Union, which is diametrically opposed to all the progressive things that Labour actually wants to do at present.
Yeah, Well, those are good points, and that's what we've been talking about pretty much in the first part of the show. We got into all that and how the narrative's completely controlled. We do this a lot on Windows on the World because it's very important, and it's the most important thing is to be able to see outside how narrow the mainstream has become. So if you see outside what they're putting out, which is the same thing every day, and start looking at actually what's going on, it starts to get a bit clearer. But that's really what we've been talking about in the first part of the show, and how the activist versus narcissist strategy is working and how it could work. So thanks for that, Piers, and we'll catch up soon. We are doing talks in early March, I think, onwards, and we would like to do some in your area. So get in touch through the website if you'd like to book the Bigger Picture featuring myself, Piers Corbin and Sandy Adams, which is probably everything you need to know but don't know at the present. And our listeners are very well informed, but there's so much information in these talks, it will leave you armed and ready for the opponents, the people who haven't got an argument. So it will help you to deal with people who do not have an argument, and you have to have an argument, as we know. So I'm going to give the last word to Sandy, because Sandy's been here quite patiently in Windows Towers, and we've had quite a lot of input, myself and Piers. So Sandy, what have you thought about tonight's show? Is there anything you'd like to say in summing up about the things that we've covered tonight?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the yellow vest thing could be a really powerful movement. As I said earlier, provided it isn't demonised and said that people don't believe it's a right wing thing, which isn't, and it's not taken over by the Extinction Rebellion lot. I think we have a lot of power in the voice of the people, and in a rebellion that is true. And as Piers was saying, it's about the corruption in our councils, and and as he says, the social cleansing that's going on, and about the CO2 taxes. That is really important, and I think if we can actually unite like that, I mean, we've got an Extinction Rebellion nonsense thing going on. I think it's next weekend in locally, and they're walking around with coffins.
With the truth.
Yeah, and the thing is, hit them with the truth, and we can also put our point forward, which is actually CO2 taxes are killing old people. That's an extinction, if you like. There's a lot of arguments that we can put forward.
Every year from energy poverty.
Yeah, and I think CO2 is killing a lot of things. It's birds. The wind farms are killing birds. I mean, there's loads of things that you can actually flick back at them. And
I think on our website, weatheraction.com, you can find links to all this stuff and the meeting we had on the 20th of December. And you can also buy some forecasts while there's a special deal on, which is about to expire.
Ooh. So hurry!
Sorry, Sandy, carry on.
No, I think that's... But no, hurry and get your weather action reports, because it's going to be a cold winter, isn't it? We're going to have a very cold winter.
Well, there's going to be some extreme cold in the second half. Well, we have had some extreme cold right now, but the second half of January is going to see some more extremes and snow in many parts of the country.
Yeah, and Greece have snow at the moment, don't they? Which is unusual.
Yes, absolutely. The snow we thought was going to happen here, it's mostly happened a bit further east.
Yeah.
And amazing things happening in Greece, which is, it's the wild jet stream stuff, which is completely contrary to the CO2 scenario for the jet stream.
Yeah.
But January, some of the snow is not going to be so far east and should hit northern and eastern Britain certainly, and quite likely more.
Wow. Ooh, get your thermals on.
Yes. And buy our forecast, as I said again, weatheraction.com.
Thanks, Piers.
News there as well.
Thanks a lot.
Good plug. Well done, Piers.
See you very soon.
See you soon. Bye.
Okay. Bye.
That's just about it from Windows on the World. Do listen to that first part of the show, Activists versus Narcissists. Some very important information there, and it helps you understand what's going on, because it's taken us a while to put all this information together. So thanks to Sandy for joining us tonight, and Piers, and we'll see you very soon on Windows on the World. That's it. Thanks a lot and good night.
Good night.
Join me, Mark Windows, for Windows on the World live every Sunday 9 to 11 p.m. GMT. Check out our archive and programme stream at windowsontheworld.net.